Daily Devotion with Pastor Balla for February 23rd, 2022 from Acts chapter 5, Moving the Correct Direction. Sometimes in life, when we don't know what to do or where to go, we might pray to God and say, God, can you send me some direction? Can you just point me the right way? Can you give me a giant arrow or give me a sign? Well, I'm kind of having the idea that the disciples might have been feeling the same thing. Remember, they were believing and trusting in Jesus Christ. They saw his death. They saw his resurrection. They saw how 40 days later he ascended into heaven. And now Peter and John and the rest of the apostles were busy telling the world what they had seen. But a little extra sign and a little extra direction never hurts. Especially when you remember that Peter and John were arrested, and then they were also released. You see, God works through these special signs, especially in the New Testament church, because they didn't have the New Testament like we have. We could read God's word. For Peter and John and the rest of the apostles, they would probably appreciate those little signs to make sure that they were on the correct path. So let's keep this in mind as we continue through Acts chapter 5, verse 12. Now many signs and wonders were regularly done among the people by the hands of the apostles, and they were all together in Solomon's portico. So yes, God was still working through Peter and John and the rest of the apostles, doing those special signs. And the signs would point people to Jesus as the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God. And where would you go if you wanted to hear more about God and what God had done for you? You would go to the temple, and that's kind of where they went. They went to Solomon's portico. This portico, or you could say porch, was right there by the temple's outer court. And where else would you go but to the place where God's word would be proclaimed, like going to church? But you may remember, previously they were teaching about Jesus at the temple, and previously they were arrested. So now you have Peter and John and the rest of the apostles purposely gathering about the temple, proclaiming Jesus. And sometimes people might think, are they sort of inviting being arrested again? Well, let's find out. Verse 13, none of the rest dared join them, but the people held them in high esteem. Verse 13 reminds us that even though the apostles were right there under the nose of the religious leaders, they did not at that moment arrest them. Why? Because of the people. The people were greatly valuing what the apostles were teaching. Verse 14, and more than ever, believers were added to the Lord, multitudes of both men and women, so that they even carried out the sick into the streets and laid them on cots and mats, that as Peter came by, at least his shadow might fall on some of them. The people also gathered from the towns around Jerusalem, bringing the sick and those afflicted with unclean spirits, and they were all healed. Because of the signs, because of these miracles, God added more to the group of believers. These signs and miracles were not designed to puff up Peter and John and the rest of the apostles, but to point the crowds, to point the people to the fact that Jesus is the Christ, that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, so that people would put their faith and trust in God alone. God's peace and many blessings be with you. And thank you for listening. And please take an opportunity to share this message with others. If you have enjoyed these daily devotions, please consider making a donation to Peace Lutheran Church, 24024 West Main Street, Plainfield, Illinois, 60544. Thank you again for listening.